Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on, it's gonna be fun.
All right, guys, today's date, April 3rd, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know we are a news podcast, which means that we do try to hold ourselves by integrity, by only giving you the news sources from the most reputable sites with award-winning journalism. We don't do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, The Beast, The Daily Wire, wherever your extreme left or extreme right sources are from. We don't do that. We just give you the facts, just the facts. At the same time, guys, we do try to maintain professionalism, but sometimes, hey, cuss words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised aside from that welcome. So, how do we usually start this? Well, I won't say bad news, but I guess if you're Trump, I guess it is. I guess it is. We'll find out.
While Donald Trump's media company, which just went public last week, has now lost $2 billion in value. The stock price plunging after it was revealed how much the company lost last year. The stock down 21% in a single day today, and now the warning about its future. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, stock in Donald Trump's media company tanking after Trump's social media platform Truth Social reported losing $58 million last year. The company was valued at nearly $10 billion after it went public last week as Trump supporters rushed to scoop up shares.
The stock has gone through the roof. And really, this is, I think, in the true sense, this is really it's a great sign of where the people in this country stand.
Trump's own majority stake then worth close to $6 billion.
Truth Social is doing very well. It's hot as a pistol and doing great.
But today, that rude awakening, the revelation of last year's losses sent the stock plunging more than 20% and the value of Trump's own stake losing more than $1 billion. And tonight, there's a real question whether Truth Social can even survive, David. And auditors quoted in a regulatory filing saying that $58 million net operating loss last year raises substantial doubt that Trump Media can be a viable company going forward. David?
I mean, wow, it's kind of like almost every business Trump ever has. He's either gone bankruptcy, underground, or, well, pretty much gone. Well, it's amazing, because Truth Social did become a part of a conglomerate, the Donald Trump Media Group, which did go public on the stock exchange. And yes, for a short time, the stocks were looking pretty good for Trump, only for Trump to turn around and sit there and say, yeah, no. At the same time, things are plummeting. Who freaking knew? Only because there may be some issues with the booking, that they've lost more money than they've actually done. Yep, that sounds right about Trump. At the same time, guys, this was all Trump's big ass strategy. Not only that, with the fact of, as he was trying to get money up for his bond because an appeals court decided that $464 million was too much of a punishment for a guy who claims he's one of the richest men in the world, decided to knock it down to 175. So the whole Truth Social becoming public and trying to get shares from that. Well, here's the thing about Trump. Trump is trying to get those shares back in the only way he knows how, suing somebody.
Just the last hour or so that Mr. Trump is apparently suing two co-founders of Truth Social. Why?
If I was president,
this is complicated. He is suing them, suggesting that they did not properly set up the business in the proper way. They have about 8% stake in the company. Donald Trump has about 60% stake in the company. And when you're looking at the millions of dollars at play here, this is where it could become significant. This is its first week being traded on the stock exchange. Just yesterday alone, Donald Trump watched the value of the company drop by about 20%, which has a value of about $1 billion. And he is prevented from selling his stake in the company for at least 6 months. And there's a chance that this meme stock could significantly drop. And at a moment here in which he is saying his financial circumstances, potentially even tied to the sell or the ability to sell Truth Social, the extent to which he can have a greater share of the company and his name is imperative for him. And that's clearly a part of this lawsuit, Hallie.
Vaughn Hilliard live for us.
So, long story short, what the man was saying is that basically Trump has decided that I'm going to go ahead and basically sue the people in order to get the stocks back. So therefore, I can have my cake and eat it too. Crazy, right? That he would do such a thing because Truth Social is such a wonderful site when it's pretty much his soapbox because, well, he's basically been kicked off everything else. So Truth Social as a whole right now is just doing flammably well as all his wonderful businesses have done in the past. We really should not be surprised by that, but I just figured we needed something funny. Before we get to the news, that yes, somehow, some way, Trump has posted the richest man, he claims, on earth, was finally able to post his $175 million bond in the appeal of the court case in which he's still on the hook for $464 million. But you probably wonder, who was crazy enough to sign this bond? Well, here it is.
Trump secured this bond?
Well, the company that helped him do it is called Knight Specialty Insurance Company. This is a company that's part of a group of companies owned by Don Hankey, who's another billionaire. He's worth about $7.5 billion. Interestingly, Don Hankey has always provided two key loans for Trump against Trump Tower and his golf resort Doral down in Miami, back when he was facing sort of that debt crisis around the time that he came out of office. So 2 times you see this billionaire stepping in and saying, these are financial arrangements that I can do. I think that I can make money on these, and essentially saving Trump.
Well, that's pretty remarkable that it's coming from someone that he has gone to before.
Yeah, that's right. And, Don Hankey's kind of an interesting guy. He made his fortune in subprime auto loans. So this is somebody who's, comfortable with lending money to people that other people wouldn't necessarily want to give money to. He's a strictly numbers guy who's going to look at this and say, okay, yep, he's got the collateral, he's got the cash, which Trump does. I can, do this bond and we're going to make money on it. And that's the end of the story. And that's how Trump ultimately was able to secure this.
Well, on that front, Trump had said a few things when this bond was reduced, when he couldn't pay what it was initially. But when it was reduced, he kind of had said he would use collateral or cash. Then he said pretty definitively one time leaving court that he was going to do it in cash. Do we know what was the case here?
Well, this was a bond, so you would expect that it would be collateral that he had posted. And I would expect that the collateral that he posted with Knight Insurance was cash. And when I say cash, I mean liquid assets. So, you could take stocks, you could take bonds, you could take actually cash sitting in a bank account, all of which Trump has plenty. But if you add all of that up to sort of a liquid assets category, you're looking at roughly $400 million for Donald Trump. And now between this one and the E. Jean Carroll one, the majority of his cash is now tied up in these bond agreements. And so that's going to limit his ability to grow or expand his business, even to operate his business very.
So long story short, I'm trying to figure out, every time I hear Knight Securities, it's like, sounds like something that should be watching a laundromat, not something that's signing on to basically give the bond that allows Trump to continue his appeal. But yes, after all his whining and bitching, he finally did actually put up the money, and we'll see from there whether or not the appeals go through. Keep in mind, it does not erase the $464 million judgment against him, although he's going to have a hard time trying to explain to an appeals court why this case should be given a second chance. Because keep in mind, he was literally caught puffing up his business holdings in order to get bigger loans, which again, his lawyers argued that it's a victimless crime. Note how I say this, guys. There's no such thing as a victimless crime. The fact that, the banks got repaid, so therefore there was no crime. If I did, and keep in mind, I point this out, what Trump did was basically take the value, the evaluations of his holdings and puff them up. Now, say for instance, yours truly wanted to get a Ferrari. In order to get said Ferrari, I would have to show that my finances are high enough. Well, let's be honest. I haven't won the lottery. So therefore, me and Ferraris, the only close way I'm getting close to Ferrari is by Google Earth. Understandably so. But if I turn around and puff up my stuff to get a Ferrari, and the finance department, the good folks Ferrari go, wait a minute, he doesn't own a villa in his own island, and this thing and this that nature. His properties don't equal up to that much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's called fraud. And if you are caught, you more than likely will be paying a fine and or going to jail. However, it's a crime. What Trump and his highly earning lawyers right now are arguing is that, well, those loans have been paid off. It's a victimless crime, and therefore he should be held accountable. Which again, they try to narrow this down and say, well, he didn't really do a crime if he paid it back. Yes, he did do a crime, and he's continually doing it. So therefore, it's going to be an interesting appeals court case, because if that appeal does literally go down the tube as I hope it will, that means that $464 million judgment goes back into effect, and there's a certain AG out there that is looking at Trump Tower and going, mine, or I should say for the state of New York. But we'll wait and see. But on the other side of the Democrats, independent runner RFK, or I should say Mr. Kennedy Jr., if you haven't heard this man speak, this is the same man that was basically on social media talking about the vaccines and why he won't get them, and the fact that the vaccines are untested. He was spouting things really from a tinfoil hat nature. Well, he has said the one thing in his political campaign, in his presidential campaign, which again is weird, and at the same time, I feel like he is just being desperate. But Robert F. Kennedy, and I cannot make this up, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that the biggest attack to American democracy is not Trump, but Biden. Let him explain this bullshit.
President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics. President Biden, for the first president in history, to use his power over the Secret Service to deny Secret Service protection to one of his political opponents for political reasons. He's weaponizing the federal agencies. Those are really critical threats to
Donald
democracy.
Trump, of course, tried to overturn a free and fair election. He tried to overturn one, right? He's still fighting in court.
Yes.
How is that not a threat to democracy?
Well, I think that is a threat to democracy. If trying to overthrow the election clearly is a threat to democracy. But the question was, who is a worse threat to democracy? And what I would say is, I'm not going to answer that question, but I can argue that President Biden is, because the First Amendment, Aaron, is the most important. Adams and Hamilton and Madison said, we put the guarantee of freedom of expression in the First Amendment because all of our other constitutional rights depend on it. If you have a government that can silence its opponent, it has license for any atrocity.
So just to be clear, you're saying you could make an argument that President Biden is a worse threat to democracy than Donald Trump. That's what you just said.
But who else has ever tried to censor? What president in history has ever tried to censor political opponents? What president has weaponized the federal agency? When my father came into the Justice Department, the first week he was there, he got all of the branch and division attorneys together, and he said, whatever we do, we are not going to use the power of the Justice Department for political reasons.
Trump, of course, has said that he would do that. He has said that he would do that.
And that is reprehensible.
And he is the only president who's tried to overthrow the results of an election.
Well, you know what? Let me say something about that. I'm not going to defend President Trump on that.
Woo! I have seen more dancing by a turkey neck on Thanksgiving than Mr. Kennedy Jr. himself. I mean, guys, there's nothing more interesting because yes, he is a presidential candidate to face President Joe Biden right now. But the question is simple. The question is simple. Who is a greater threat to democracy? A man who is literally doing everything he can to avoid jail and usurp power, or a gentleman who is probably too old to be who's too old to be president, but at least tries to do some decency behind it. And he's going to sit there and say, well, Biden weaponizes, well, Biden allows our social media access to be seen by the FBI, the CIA, and all those other alphabet agencies. And yet, I can't help but forget that wasn't there a certain act that was done back in 2001 that allowed all this anyway, called the Patriot Act? Because for a lot of people, look, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. The Patriot Act hasn't gone away. It's been in effect. It's been in effect for like the last 20 plus years. It allows basically Congress to say, we're going to look at your calls, your texts, your emails, things of that nature, and we're going to scan them for terroristic activity. The NSA listens to calls. They've admitted that. There have been shows about that, made spoofs about the NSA listening to people's calls. So to sit there and say that Biden is weaponizing our social media against us, that's kind of on the bullshit side. At the same time, he's weaponizing the DOJ. At what point? Because if you think about it, the DOJ basically went after those that have actually committed real crimes. However, in his case, he's saying, well, no president has ever weaponized the FBI, Department of Justice. Well, how has he weaponized them? Because to me, you're starting to sound more like QAnon, which is basically a toilet bowl for idiots. So I can understand where Robert Kennedy might be having a problem with reality, because right outside of the point that the fact that he needs a lozenge, a Ricola, lemon tea with honey, and possibly a throat colonoscopy, the man's really talking out of his ass, pretty much. But again, this is coming from the same person that wants to challenge Biden from a Democratic side, from an independent seat. And I wonder why he's independent, because ain't nobody signing on to that mess. Moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this as well, because as you all know, this is around the time where graduation is about to happen for those that are graduating from high school, those that are about to go into college and begin their next step in higher learning. However, there's a problem with FAFSA, which again, we shouldn't be surprised. The problem with FAFSA is the fact that of a new tax law, which basically the tax data deferred for the IRS impacts fewer than 20% or potentially 1 million of those forms submitted by students, which is basically saying that because of the data issues, that it basically will impact how much financial aid a student will get in going to college. Now, eventually this problem will eventually be solved, but the problem is it will take a while to do, which tells me off the bat that's just the tip of the iceberg. But with FAFSA, I've never understood it. I've been through it myself. I've never understood how FAFSA can be so complicated, and yet getting students to sign the student loans is practically easy. Because with FAFSA, it should be, again, if FAFSA goes back to education, let's also be honest, education is not funded the same way the Department of Defense is. That being said, you think they would have had more time to figure FAFSA out, because FAFSA has already been loaded up with issues from this year. And again, with students that are wanting to consider going into college, yes, if you're not wanting to pay $80,000, $90,000 a year, because tuition always goes up at colleges. I've never understood. I have never understood how tuition goes up at colleges, but the education is still the same. I have never understood that. Colleges, especially sports colleges that have lucrative sports teams that are making billions of dollars a year, and yet the tuition goes up, which kind of leads into the next part, which again, a lot of students are really reconsidering college for fair reasons. One, it is too freaking high. Two, you don't want to take on debt that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life.
Now to the shocking price of higher education. Students are taking on massive amounts of debt to pay for college tuition, some even paying more than $90,000 to attend school this year. The universities say that help is available, mostly in the form of student loans and financial aid. ABC News business reporter Alexis Christoforous has these details. Alexis, $90,000, that is a lot of money to pay for an education. What is being done and what can be done to help make college more affordable here?
Elizabeth, these are eye-popping numbers, and lots of families are getting sticker shock right now. This isn't anything new. The price of a college education has been going up for years. But just today, we learned that 4 colleges in the state of Massachusetts will be charging more than $90,000 for tuition, housing, room and board, other expenses beginning in the fall. They are Boston University, Tufts, Wellesley, and Yale. Just take that in for a moment. Wellesley over 92,000, BU over 90,000. The median Massachusetts household income, $93,000. Obviously, the math is not working out there. Now, for these schools for their part, about 56% of BU students receive financial aid in some form. Wellesley College says about 60% of their students receive some sort of financial aid. But remember, financial aid, Elizabeth, could look like a lot of different things. They could be grants. There are merit-based scholarships that would give aid, but a lot of these are student loans. And we know already that college students are graduating with thousands and thousands of dollars in debt.
A lot of student debt, and a lot of those students have had issues getting access to financial aid with that new FAFSA rollout, difficulties in getting that aid, understanding how much they're going to get. How should families be thinking about this as a budgeting and math question, Alexis? Is this ultimately a good investment still?
I think that that's a conversation a lot of families are having in their homes right now and have been having. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, a lot of folks are now enrolling in vocational schools. They're going for trades. We're seeing the numbers rise for people studying things like electrical work, becoming plumbers, and working with their hands. We had seen a drop in those kinds of jobs, and now we're seeing a pickup again, as a lot of college graduates are also saying they're getting jobs that are sort of below them, or they're being underemployed. They're getting jobs that are not in their degrees. Right now, the unemployment rate for students graduating college is higher than the unemployment rate on the national average. We haven't seen that in decades. So I think a lot of folks are trying to understand whether or not there is value in higher education. For some people, there definitely is. Of course, the key is trying to start to save money as early as possible and to limit the amount of loans you need to take out in order to do it.
Alexis Christoforous.
So again, this is the part where I usually would sit there and say, well, college is going to be helpful. College is going to be this. But let me be honest, as a graduate of 2001, because 2001 sounds like it's almost been 30 years ago, but really it's kind of only been 23 years ago. When I was graduating 2001, that was the big thing. Go to college, get a job, go to college, get your degree. Your degree leads to your career leads to the big jobs. Vocational jobs, such as, being a plumber, electrician, an auto technician, they weren't mentioned a lot. At the same time, they really were. And I'm going to be honest, in my 41 years, it's like the one thing I kind of wish I did was pick up a trade first, because the trade industry will never go anywhere. And because we needed at the time, you always need contractors, plumbers, carpenters. The fact that those trades never go away should be the first thing that are mentioned to students in schools. Because college is actually becoming a bloated reason to actually get higher education. Because if you really think about it, most jobs these days, as the trend is going along, most jobs are no longer requiring a college degree. For those that already have degrees, you are dealing with student loans, present company included. At the same time, the job market is very not. I mean, they can sit again. That's the one thing I always argue about the job market, because there's always open jobs, right? But hiring at this point is paralyzed, because those that have degrees are finding it hard to find jobs in their fields, or that to find jobs that are different from what they went to school for, or that to find lower jobs just to make ends meet. Again, the job market out there has been crazy, but for the trade industry, it's always been there. So I've always been confused or wondering, like, why 23 years ago was trade jobs not pushed as hard as education, going to college? Oh, go to college, go get your degree, because that was the big push. At the time, that really was the big push. That was go to college, get your degree, go get a job. Oh, what about the student loans? Oh, well, don't worry about them right now. Think of them as investments in yourself. You'll be able to pay that back once you get that career. But the problem is with student loans, it's predatory. You're asking, you won't, I always find this interesting. You won't give an 18-year-old a $10,000 to a $100,000 business loan. You will think it's crazy to give $50,000 as a business loan to an 18-year-old, but you'll gladly give a $90,000 student loan with ridiculous interest and APR to an 18-year-old, because you know you have them hooked for, you have them on the hook for the rest of their lives. That unless through some miracle they're able to actually pay that all off and be free of it. But for a lot of us, that student loan debt, that's something we may never escape. It's again, a lot of kids who are coming out for this class of 2024, they're smart. They're like, why do I need to take on student loan debt? Why do I need to take on an exasperated amount of debt for a maybe? So that's why a lot of them are going into the trades, and rightfully it should. Honestly, I keep hoping for the day that a lot of kids kind of just skip college, because college is becoming unaffordable, almost like everything else in this country. But college, as far as higher education, is becoming unaffordable. And like one of my favorite rappers said, your child's future was the first to go with budget cuts. And again, it is amazing to me that I'll keep asking this question. Why isn't education being funded as heavily as defense? Because I think you'd have smarter people and less wars, personally. But again, I'm not knocking the whole idea of it. And again, to these graduates of 2024, may you make the best decision you can for yourselves and your family. But hey, nobody is going to doubt. Nobody's going to blame you if you don't want to sign on for student loans. Because as you see, for the rest of us, we're dealing with just trying to get ours wiped out because businesses got theirs forgiven and nobody's complaining. But I digress. Moving right along, though, I did want to talk about this because, again, the Tulsa Race Massacre. Yes, it was brought to light by Lovecraft Country. Yes, a lot of people are reliving their history about it, and some people of a certain skin tone don't want this to be relived because they try to say we moved on. And yet, for a lot of us, no, we haven't. The reason why I bring up Tulsa Massacre, because we covered the story last year where the last remaining survivors, keep in mind, because we're talking about this is basically a case for reparations. We had sat there and said, we have found the last surviving members of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And they were suing the city of Tulsa. They were suing for reparations because, again, because of what happened, certain groups profited from it. So the argument for about slavery reparations is always coming back to the fact of, well, how can we know who was a slave or who was a descendant and things of that nature? We now have a clear case that those survivors were there and now they're seeking reparations. Now, initially, the case was dismissed. And again, we couldn't figure out why it was dismissed initially. But now at this point, it is being argued for appeal, which it should, because this right here is a clear case of reparations. This is the fact that a mob of white people decided to take out a town of black people, simply put, for no other reason outside of that. And no arrest ever happened, by the way. No arrest, nobody ever did jail time, things of that nature for that terrorist attack. And now you have two survivors that are both 109 years old that are right now dealing with the Oklahoma Supreme Court to appeal. Because again, it is amazing to me that when you have that much in front of you, you have that much information, that much history, that much knowledge, that the city of Oklahoma decided that, the state of Oklahoma decided that, no, we're not going to hold them accountable for reparations, which again makes no sense. So we're going to hope that these survivors hold on, because the simple fact of the matter is they are due reparations, along with the fact that others about that massacre are due reparations. But that's part of a bigger story that I definitely do want to keep up with. And again, I hope the survivors hang on because they need to have their story told and they should be compensated heavily. But going back to Congress for a second, Speaker Mike Johnson might be in a little bit of hot water because, well, if a certain crazy nut called Marjorie Taylor Greene has their way, he may no longer be Speaker of the House.
Is coming to his own defense after Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion to vacate his speakership. The Republican leader speaking on Fox News last night, he called Greene's motion a distraction from our mission.
Recognize this is a distraction from our mission, but with the smallest margin in U.S. history, we're sometimes going to get legislation that we don't like. And the Democrats know that when we don't all stand together with our razor-thin majority, then they have a better negotiation position. And that's why we got some of the things we didn't like.
Do have a razor-thin majority, and as Johnson faces the heat from his own party, he is signaling movement on the Ukraine aid bill when the House returns from recess next week. For more now, we want to bring in Rachel Bade, a senior correspondent for Politico and ABC News contributing political correspondent. So, Rachel, let's just start here. What are you hearing from your sources? As we saw, one of these challenges from Republicans was fatal to the speakership for McCarthy. Do we think the same thing might happen here with Mike Johnson?
Yeah, Trevor, it certainly seems likely that we're heading toward an attempted mutiny of Speaker Johnson. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Trump ally from Georgia, Republican and conservative, she's already filed, as you mentioned, this motion to vacate. She hasn't forced a vote on that. However, it does look like that's going to be increasingly likely. She has had complaints in the past about the bipartisan deal that Johnson struck with Democrats, but she's also identified Ukraine assistance as a red line for her and said that if he allows a vote on the floor on Ukraine, she will try to oust him. Now, the speaker has said in that Fox News interview that he actually is going to allow at some point a vote on Ukraine. So it does seem like it's likely. I do think the bigger question right now, Trevor, is can he survive this? And what I'm hearing from the speaker's allies is that they're basically having him go on offense here. I mean, they wanted him to go on Fox News. He talked about this slim margin he has and that he doesn't like a lot of the deals he's had to cut with Democrats, but that the reality is Democrats control the Senate, they control the White House, and so Republicans can only get so much in terms of wins, and that's the argument he's trying to make right now.
And in that vein, how do you think this Ukraine funding bill would play out? Would this be viewed as a deal he's making with Democrats when it comes to actually voting on it?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that Johnson is trying to sort of thread the needle here when it comes to Ukraine. He has not allowed a vote on Ukraine assistance for months because of this threat to his speakership. But now he's getting this pressure from GOP defense hawks, people like Mike Turner, who lead the Intelligence Committee, saying, look, our own national security is at risk and you have to do something now to help Ukraine. The thing that he put forward and that he outlined in this Fox News interview is that he wants to change this proposal that passed the Senate to give Ukraine $60 billion. He wants to make some of it a loan, as former President Donald Trump has suggested in the past. He wants to basically unlock frozen assets, frozen Russian assets, and send some of that to Ukraine so they can use that to buy missiles. And then he has a couple of sort of energy demands. And so what he's trying to do here is sort of move the Ukraine proposal a little bit to the right, but not so much that he's going to alienate Democrats and get a no on this package from the White House. So we'll see if he's able to do that.
So long story short, Mike Johnson's probably screwed. Again, this is coming from the same group of people who wanted Kevin McNeely out, and he's out. And it took them 6 to 7 times to figure out someone else who's going to be the House Speaker. And again, this is over Ukraine. I literally could argue the fact that Ukraine, along with Israel, has made buku bucks off of us in foreign aid. I could also argue the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene and others basically want to make Ukraine pay, make them do loans, things of that nature. But Mike Johnson, of course, is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either deal with the Democrats to get a deal done, or by getting a deal done, you're going to upset the same people that got you into the speaker seat and will probably try to oust you out. Keep in mind, if you are a conservative, especially a conservative politician, good luck trying to get reelected in whatever district that you're in, because y'all's track record is horrible. And I mean horrible. You guys have got nothing done this entire time in Congress and got paid for it. And yet you say other people are moochers. That's funny. But we'll see if he remains it. I said my money is on Johnson being removed as House Speaker for the years over with. So we still got time. Back in California, fast food workers are getting a pay increase. And guys, I can't keep saying this enough, because the way that we solve the economic issues that we have in America, pay people, although $20 an hour is not bad, we can do better.
Time now for our last call. About 500,000 workers in California are getting a big bump in pay today, as the state's minimum wage for fast food employees is jumping to $20 an hour, giving many a 25% raise in their paycheck from just last week. The law affects some of the biggest restaurant chains, including McDonald's, Pizza Hut, KFC, Chipotle, and Subway. Supporters of the law say workers need to make a livable wage in the nation's most populated state, but opponents say that customers will be the ones paying for those higher wages. Let's bring this back to our panel. LZ, could you survive off of $20 an hour in today's economy?
Not in the same fashion that I'm doing now, but I am certainly happy that others certainly have an opportunity to make this kind of money, though I will caution that capitalism isn't about equity and capitalism isn't about fairness. And so I fully expect the price to be passed on to customers. And I also see an uptick in probably introduction of automation so that there are less workers, because capitalism requires more money and they don't really care about people.
Well, and LZ, to your point, I mean, this going to Julie, Pizza Hut recently cut some workers over notoriously low profit margins. If workers end up getting the axe because of $4 wage bumps, I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose. But I mean, is there a solution to this?
Yeah, we have record low unemployment. So it's not like this is somehow affecting our job market. Look, the bottom line is you cannot survive in Los Angeles or San Francisco on $20 an hour. And so I'm glad that these people are having some sort of recourse to be able to live in California. And I think this is all to the good.
John, McDonald's and Chipotle in California have already said that their restaurants are planning to do price increases to make up for this new state law. I mean, how do you think that's going to go over with customers?
Well, to me, I think the customers are going to scream and yell, but you know they're going to get their food to some extent. I mean, I echo LZ's sentiments. It's capitalism, and you know the minimum wage was never meant to be a living wage. And that's the problem. The fundamental problem with our economy right now is that people at the lower end of the spectrum don't have the economic opportunity they once did. And it's just a fact that they're going to cut jobs. They're going to automate more. Look what McDonald's does now. And that's what's going to happen. It's unfortunate. It's good for the people there. But if they're using that as living wage, that's the fundamental problem with our economy we got to fix.
And that is our last call for.
So let me stop right there, because, again, I kind of got an issue with the guy in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I just want to point that out. The guy in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Sir, this is the problem. Minimum wage is basically, because for all those that you would think, for a guy who looks like he's probably seen a few, maybe one or too many Botox injections. But anyway, minimum wage, guys, how it is designed is that is the least amount of money you can make, but you could actually afford an apartment, amenities, food, utilities, things of that nature. That is the lowest bare bottom amount that you can get, but still be able to retain some amenities, a roof over your head, yada. That's what it's designed for. The fact that we are arguing that California gave its fast food industry $20 an hour starting out. Keep in mind, I live in the South. I can tell you right now, the McDonald's down the street from us down the street from my house, literally has a starting wage of $15 an hour. Managers make $17, and I can hear that. I can hear this already. But Will, it's fast food. Why do you want to pay somebody more to flip your burgers? Why? I'll tell you why. Because the fast food industry is one of the biggest employers, one of the biggest groups of workers, mind you, out of McDonald's, out of Burger King, Wendy's, all of them. In-N-Out, Whataburger, what have you. The fact that is a large workforce. And it's not just teenagers, as conservatives love to say. These are teenagers with after-school jobs. I just don't understand why someone making, and again, this is another argument which also annoys me. Why does someone who flips burgers will make more than me? That sounds like it's a problem that you're mad about what you're getting paid for what you're doing versus someone who has to be customer service, make sure the food is right, maintain food and safety regulations, OSHA regulations, and at the same time have some sort of sanity after an 8 to 10 hour shift, and they're doing this on a weekly basis. There's more to it, is what I'm getting at. But $20 an hour is not bad. Well, that means prices are going to go up. Prices have been going up steadily for a while. Paychecks and income have not. So, but the fact that they're going to try to sit there and say, well, there's going to be more automation, there's going to be jobs lost. Well, let me tell you something. Unless fast food industry has figured out how to make a burger and fries from beginning to end without human hands, there will always be somebody at these restaurants. Now, again, we could have a strike. A strike would clear up a whole lot of things, especially in the sense of the matter of just why it's such an argument. Because we don't argue. We never argue when CEOs make too much money. We never argue that these corporations that are making buku profits in a post-COVID. They're making buku profits in a post-COVID era. We never complain when we see the millionaires still carrying their money somehow after tax season, and we're looking at our tax returns and going, where did it go? But the one time we sit there and say, well, workers need to be paid more, here come the pearl clutchers. Oh, well, maybe you should get a different job. At this point, every job is vital. At the same time, everybody should be able to work one job. And this is my feeling on this, that everybody should be able to work one job and to be able to sustain themselves. Because anybody in the workforce has learned that right now, practically any job will work you to death. And then once you've croaked, they'll post a job open sign. Again, pay people a living wage. It's not that hard. But the scary reality is, if we really did pay people according to our rate of inflation and productivity in this country, do you not know the minimum wage would be closer to $28 to $32 an hour? That would be the minimum wage. $28 to $32 an hour would be the minimum wage as it stands. And again, for everything that's going up, why not our income as well? Because they're too busy trying to squeeze every bit of us, every bit that we can give, until we finally say enough's enough. So yes, am I glad that those California fast food workers are getting their wages increased? Absolutely. Because here's what happens when you pay people. When you pay people, they're less stressed. When you pay people if you pay people a livable wage, they're less stressed, less problems at home. They can come to work a lot easier. They actually may work harder for you. Because why? At one point in time in America's history, when people were getting paid and getting their insurance paid by their employers and was able to get a house, was able to get a car, was able to get their education and things of that nature, you know what the one thing Americans didn't talk about? Stress. Figure that out. Moving right along, guys, it's amazing that for people that get elected, they not really do background checks. Much like this person who was a white supremacist and yet somehow got into the office where he is. And then someone decided to do a background check. And no, I couldn't make this up.
It may be primary day in half a dozen states, but we're also following a recall election today in one small Oklahoma town. An Enid, Oklahoma City Council member is facing a recall election over his ties to white nationalists. Pictures reveal that the council member, Judd Blevins, was part of the Unite the Right march in Charlottesville in 2017. NBC News' Brandy Zarowski tried to get some answers from Blevins about his past conduct following a recent city council meeting.
You were a leader in an Oklahoma chapter of a white nationalist organization, and I want to know if you have any explanation to that.
No. Why did you march and unite the right? Why did you hold a tiki torch?
And Brandy Zadrozny joins me now. So, Brandy, explain to us who Judd Blevins is.
Well, Judd Blevins is an Iraq war vet. He works with his family's roofing business here in Enid, Oklahoma, and he is a sitting city council member. He is also, as you just mentioned, from 2017 to at least 2019, was an active member of a group called Identity Europa, which was the largest white nationalist group in the U.S. during the time of the so-called alt-right. He was an active member, a recruiter, an organizer. He led the Oklahoma State chapter. And now, because of that, he is up for recall in this polling place right behind me.
So who discovered that he was part of the Unite the Right march in Charlottesville?
This is really interesting because this information was actually out there. It was available on the internet, but it was available in some of the leftier, more progressive spaces. And people in Enid generally are pretty conservative folks. So there are some progressive people in Enid, and they were the ones who found this information, and they took it to city council meetings. They organized protests. They did not let it go. And this has happened for about a year now, where they have just not let this thing go. They've gone to city council meetings and sort of taken over public comment, reading his secret messages on secret white supremacist forums, showing pictures of him at the Unite the Right rally. And these folks are called the Enid Social Justice Committee. So these are really the people who are responsible for this recall today. They went and got signatures, and they filed the recall petition.
And it seems as though even Eden's mayor seems to be opposed to Blevins keeping his job. What did he tell you?
Yeah, the mayor, and it should be stated, is a conservative Republican himself. A lot of conservative Republicans, now that they know this information, are really drawing a line and in some ways finding ways to unify with some of the most progressive citizens here. And the mayor told me last month when we met that he had talked to Mr. Blevins and asked him straight up about his white nationalist ties, because Blevins had always sort of skirted the issue, said, I'm against racism, but not specifically addressed those ties. But he did in a private meeting with the mayor. The mayor told us about it. And further, the mayor expressed concern that Blevins is still associated with this group. He is concerned that he's associated with other white nationalists that have moved on into other groups who may be contributing to his campaign or helping him in some other way. A lot of white nationalist groups during this whole chaos have been talking about Judd Blevins, suggesting that their members reach out to the mayor, reach out to city council members and the local paper to try to influence the recall election.
And do you have any sense of how it's going to turn out? I know you've been at that polling place all day, and there's probably not a lot of polling, but is there a general vibe as to how today could go?
Not a lot of polling. This is a very small race, right, with very big implications. But we've been standing outside this polling place all day. We've talked to dozens of people. And the vibe that I get from people who are willing to talk to us is that they didn't know, but now that they do, are ready to make a different choice.
Okay.
So all I can sit there and say is, nobody does background checks. Nobody, not a single one, because for a guy that was at the Unite the Right rally on January 6th, who has ties to white supremacist groups and can't answer a straight question on whether or not that racism is a problem. I'm just saying, a simple Google search probably would have solved some problems. But hey, it goes to show you that the political system does work, because he is being recalled, which means that he's got to run again. So all's well it is well, I guess. But it's amazing that, it's kind of worse. It's almost as bad as the white supremacist that taught kids, and yet at the same time hates the same kids that she was teaching. Yeah, I wish that was made up. That's an actual story too. But moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this case because, again, in the world of Trump, if you sue and lose a case, try again. What I mean by that is they are basically, I should say, Trump and his co-defendants are trying to appeal the case of initially that the current DA, Fani Willis. They're trying to basically get her booted from the Georgia case, but they're trying to do it in appeals. Keep in mind, just a little over a week ago, where the judge then decided that even though there wasn't that much of impropriety, that there was still a lot of smoke there, and basically gave DA Willis a choice that you and your prosecutor can both resign or just him. He decided to resign, which leaves Fani Willis on the case. Of course, Trump and his co-defendants don't like that, because with his history of black women prosecuting Trump, he's kind of 0-1 right now. And again, Fani Willis has already sat there and said that her team has never stopped working, especially during her court case. So you can only imagine the trial that's coming forward. Again, this is the election interfering case in Georgia. So again, the same election interference where Trump had called the Secretary of State there and asked to find 11,000 plus votes. So we really shouldn't be surprised that, well, this is the same person you tried to character assassinate, in which she turned around from the witness stand and basically just embarrassed the entire prosecution, which to the point to where, of course, she was out as prosecutor. But again, she is still the DA for the full Fulton County. Her team has been working tirelessly. And I don't know about you guys, but I am waiting for this Georgia election interference case because, number one, it is a federal case, which means that if Trump loses this case, therefore, goodbye presidential run. Because, again, you can't really run for president if you're a criminal. We should know this by now. But again, we've got 3 shots. This is one of 3. And Fani Willis, there's something about, hell has no fury like a woman scorned. This ain't Texas, but good luck. You're gonna need it. The last story I got, guys, is something that has always bothered me. And what I mean by bothered me, guys, is that education is basically being privatized. Even in my home state of Tennessee, they're trying to push forward with school vouchers that nobody asked for. Those same school vouchers that allow school choice, which on paper sounds great, but the funding definitely is being taken from public schools. Everybody's ever been to public school, you already know teachers are underfunded, these schools are overcrowded, these kids are being subjected to testing that is outdated and it does not help them. They are basically learning to repeat, not learning to think. And again, it's a whole avalanche of problems. But those problems were put in to make these schools so bad that privatization was the only way. Even more so, religious schools are starting to branch out into these public school areas. And again, it sounds great, but I got a problem with it.
This group of Whitehall School District students in Ohio put on matching shirts, board a bus, and head half a mile down the road to church. There, elementary students like Emmanuel and Savannah Brady pray
Amen.
and study scripture.
He approached the Philistine.
This is LifeWise Academy, a nonprofit bringing the Bible back into the public school day.
The learning really helps you learn about Jesus and what happened in the past.
How popular would you say it is at school? Mainly, the whole class is over at LifeWise.
LifeWise started in 2018 with 2 schools. Today, it partners with more than 300 schools in a dozen states. It's funded by private donations, and it's legal, so long as it's optional, off campus, and not during essential classes like math. Though to some, it represents an increasingly blurry line between the separation of church and state. Doug Shoemaker, a Whitehall administrator, says the district has allowed this kind of program for decades.
We neither discourage participation or reward or encourage it.
Dad Daryl Brady says LifeWise lessons positively motivate Emmanuel and Savannah.
Do you think church has a place in school?
Yeah, we're trying to bring churches back into schools for a long time.
Some of these sessions take place when library periods would be happening in school.
Mm-hmm.
Are you worried about your kids missing out on that experience?
Not at all. There's 39 books in the Old Testament and 27 books in the New Testament.
Founder Joel Penton says he saw a growing need, including those unable to afford private Christian schools.
In this area, about 50% of the students take part in LifeWise. What do you think that means for the other 50%? Do you think they feel left out?
I wouldn't characterize it that way. Kids go in different directions all the time. On the playground, some kids play kickball, other kids will go to the monkey bars.
This is a little different because these kids are going to physically be gone.
Sure. Hopefully LifeWise is an attractive thing that people will want to participate in, but we certainly don't ever want to put any undue pressure.
But Ohio mom Sarah Myers says that LifeWise does exert pressure. She's a Christian with a daughter in a school partnering with them.
No,
she won't ever let her take part, though.
It is all above board until it's not. No school staff person does anything until they do.
Chapters promised ice cream or popcorn parties if kids got their friends to sign up. Another Ohio mom sent NBC News this note her child received from a classmate on LifeWise letterhead, pre-written to say, "My favorite part of class is," the classmate writing everything and inviting the child to join LifeWise. LifeWise told NBC News that like many youth groups, they offer incentives for students and families to learn more, and that they are no different from other organizations that advocate for the policies they believe in. What do you think LifeWise is trying to do?
Influence, slant, if you will, public schools.
Joel says he pays little attention to critics.
In the United States, there are 13,000 public school districts. There are 50 million public school students.
And he hopes to make biblical lessons available to every one of them. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, Columbus, Ohio.
So yeah. So again, this is the part, and I'm going to try to be as nice as humanly possible. I'm going to try to be nice as humanly possible. There is nothing wrong. Let me first say this, because I feel like however I'm going to say this is going to come out evil and spiteful. But again, I'm going to be as tactful as I can saying this. There's nothing wrong with religion. If you want to study it, practice it. That's upon you and your family. That's y'all's decision. Cool. But the problem I have with this is that when you branch out into public school, because church and state were separated for a reason. Don't get me wrong, there are private religious schools out there. Again, if you decide that, your child going to it is the best benefit for them, again, I'm not knocking it. But here's the problem. See, there's this little fence. There's this fence that I used to say was right here. On one side of the fence, you had private religious schools. On the other side of the fence, you had public schools. Now, for me, I was lucky enough to happy to go to a public school. Happy, still had fun, got my education, happy all the time, right? But we've never had those outreach. We never had that, hey, come join us on our Bible study and things of that nature. Because to me, that sounds like indoctrination. And it's funny that it's those of religious people that always talk about indoctrination. We don't want LGBTQ plus flags. We don't want pride flags around. We don't want drag queens reading to our children because in some way, form, or fashion, it might influence them to turn gay. But you're okay with, operations like this, going out and picking up kids and teach and indoctrinating them. You can call it what it is. It is indoctrination. But again, it just bothers me that you have those out there that have no problem with it, not seeing the fact that, okay, if it's optional, because they have to go by those rules. If it's optional, it doesn't cost anything. And of course, it keeps students safe. That's the three rules they go by. And again, that's the problem I have with this, is that it's the introduction of religion into a public school system. That's the problem. Because it's always said, well, we need prayer back in school. What do you think the moment of silence was for? That moment of silence, because again, for all those that can remember, if you were my age or older, if you can remember, you had the moment of silence and you had the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And I didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance because I'm like, what am I saying these words I don't believe in? I stopped doing that when I was in 5th grade. But you had the moment of silence. You could have done anything you wanted. You could have prayed. You could have just waited until the moment was over. You could have done anything you wanted in that moment of silence, because that was the compromise. Because this whole thing of let's bring prayer back in schools, prayer was never the problem. It was more of a deterrent. It was more of a distraction, if you will, because that's kind of my thing with religious schools. I was like, I've never understood religious schools because, number one, your education should not be theological unless you're becoming a preacher or getting your bachelor in divinity. Outside of that, a kid does not need to find that out in school. But even so, it feels, and again, this is just my opinion, it just feels like indoctrination to get kids to go to religious schools, because again, that's how cults work. I'm going to say it like it is. It feels like a cult. But again, I can understand that one parent, it just that it's going to become it's not an issue now, but eventually it will become one. So it's only a matter of time. But for me, it's like, I'm sorry, I don't dig on it. But I digress. But anyway, we're going to go and move on to our feel good segment, guys, because usually how the Frack We Got Here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom since I'm making you faith in humanity. But hey, it's Wednesday. Now it's actually Thursday. It's a little after midnight, so I apologize for the late live, guys. But it is Thursday, so we will leave you guys out some good vibrations. And hopefully this story I've done is just that, because I talk about this all the time on this podcast and others about supporting the mom and pop places that actually have meaning, because I understand going to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all these other places is all great, but there's something about going to a good bookstore that has a lot of memories. And Grandma's Place in Harlem is just that.
Oh wow, yes. Grandma's Place is the toy store and the toys that I never had as a child. When I was a kid, my mother gave us fruit and clothing, and I always wanted toys. So my first toy, I got a G.I. Joe when I was 22 years old after I worked a job. But no kid should not be without a toy or a book. I was a teacher for a while, and when I couldn't be a teacher anymore, I opened Grandma's Place, and the kids are still coming in, and I'm still doing my life's work. It's my passion. I lived next door, and I had an opportunity for having a laundromat or a fish and chips joint here. And I said, what we need is a literacy center. My children, my second grade children, the ones that were read to are doing so much better. The ones that don't have parents that read to them are not doing what we need, a literacy center. So when I saw this store, I talked to the man and Cora Walker was retiring. She was a lawyer. She gave me her barrister's tables, her bookcases and everything. And I opened a literacy center here for intergenerational literacy. Find the alphabet book, the ball, To whom much is given, much is expected. And I have lived a blessed life. God has been very good to me. God gave me the brownstone that I'm living in. God allowed me to go to school. Open enrollment came along and I was allowed to go to college. I won a Ford Foundation scholarship, got my master's at Teachers College. I had to be here for the community. So God must have wanted me to be a teacher. So here I am. I was a teacher for a while, and when I couldn't be a teacher anymore, I opened Grandma's Place, and the kids are still coming in, and I'm still doing my life's work. It's my passion. And I'm an extension of the community, because when I was a little kid, I lived eight blocks down, and everybody on the block were my babysitters and took care of me because my mom had 3 jobs. So I wasn't allowed off the block, and all of the businesses were my parents, and I would go in and out of the barber shop, the beauty parlor, the pool hall, the luncheonette, and they all took care of me. So I'm now playing it forward. I am now Grandma's Place. The kids come in, everybody calls me Grandma. That's why I named the place Grandma, because my granddaughter named the store, and she was calling me Grandma, and the kids came in and they thought the name of the store was Grandma's Place.
And again, I just think that's pretty cool, because a spot that initially started out as a toy and bookstore really became a place of literacy, of learning and experiences for young children, like Grandma's Place. So again, I just love seeing stories like that. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before I do get out of here, guys, as usual. I'd always want to shout out to my friend Vaughn at Big BZA Dot on all social media. Definitely check out his YouTube page, 4 Beats. If you are interested, definitely give him a shout. Big BZA Dot on all social media. Also, guys, check out blurrstation.com. I keep talking about this site because, again, it is the Netflix that we've always wanted. It's the Hulu we've always wanted. It's the Amazon Prime we always wanted, because it is a site for people of color to showcase their talents whether it's in movies, television, special effects, comic books. It has it all. And again, definitely check out Blur Station, guys. If you definitely want to go there, go to blurstation.com and also go to the Join Now button. And from Join Now, if you'll be ever so kind to select the Blur's Eye View Affinity membership. And from there, guys, you can select any influence partner that you see there. We would all appreciate all the same. And as you can see, guys, it's $10.99 a month. Yes, $10.99 a month to watch Blur Station. I don't know about you, but that's a hell of a deal. Of course, after 36 months, you do have the option of owning a piece of Blur Station. I don't know about you guys, but the fact that you can actually own a piece of a multimedia company without going through E-Trade, without paying a buttload of money, sounds like a plan to me. And of course, the content, which I explain this all the time. On Blur Station, guys, you keep your content. They just work out the distribution for you. I don't know about you guys. It works a lot better than you going to Tubi. As you saw, Tubi is now worth $200 million. But we can do the same thing for our own site at blurstation.com, which I hope you guys all do. Content creators, if you do want to have your stuff on Blur Station, you do have to join to be a member first. And again, in our FAQ section, you can definitely see how you can go about having your content added to Blur Station. Again, the thing I keep talking about, we keep saying we want our own, but we have to build the foundation to the house that's going to last. And Blur Station is definitely it. Outside of me, guys, you can usually find me Black_Spartan615 on the socials as I do reviews on everything that I talk about. The link at the bottom, guys, I'll just make that a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, it'll take you to my link tree. That's YouTube, Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notifications button. Also, yours truly can be seen on Always Record TV, which is now an application on Roku. It's now an application on Roku, Google Play, and wherever apps can be found. So again, check me out on Always Record TV. Again, check me always out here as well, and on YouTube and Instagram until Zuckerberg and them decide to 86 all of us. But, you know, that's a matter of time. But as we wrap this up, guys, I keep stressing this enough. We are in a presidential nominee season, which means that eventually we are going to have to select our next president. I have always said multiple times who are going to be the pissed off groups out there. But again, not only just from a national standpoint, guys, you have to check your local. Get to know your candidates, know what they're standing for, see if they're doing the same issues and thoughts and viewpoints as yourself. Because again, this whole mission that I have with this podcast is about informing and encouraging you to get to know the world around you, not just the national world, but the local world. Because right now, a lot of people in my home state of Tennessee, specifically Nashville, are finding out that our legislature is full of Republican idiots. And I cannot stress that enough. But the way we can change that is that we have to remember that. We have to remember that during voting. We have to remember that these people that have been put in place to basically serve at our will are really not serving themselves. So again, you have to be active. You have to vote. If you're not doing those things, you cannot complain about what happens next. That is the whole reason. The simple fact of the matter is, it is my hope. It is my wish that if you do want to get involved, you definitely can. If you even want to run, there's plenty of sites out there that show you how to run in your home state if you so do wish. But that's my hope. The last thing I'll say about the Frack We Got Here, guys, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information and allow you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a logical perspective that basically helps you along the way. We do better as a society when we're progressive. We move forward. We right our wrongs. We try to do things differently than we did back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman as a National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up on our paycheck? Why do we keep electing different politicians in Congress, but they're still the same old game? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll all get through this. Peace.